Sorry, I can't lean over. Apparently I've got this child growing on me. So I've got about 8 questions today. So if there's any time at the end, we will open it up for 1 or 2 questions from the audience. As you all know, you get 2 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and start with Mr. Rodney Dow. We've got your intro, so if you want to take 2 minutes to introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rodney Dial, lifelong Alaskan. Lived in Ketchikan, first moved here in 1991. Out of high school at 17, joined the military as a U.S. Army Ranger. After I left, I went to college at Franklin Pierce University, focused on business management. Then was hired by the troopers, advanced up through the ranks to acting commander of 8 Detachment. I was responsible for law enforcement from essentially Yakutat to Metlakatla. Received about 100 commendations during my career, including from the legislature. I worked for the legislature for 10 years. I was the legislative liaison, so that gave me the basis of information on how to do bill analysis, fiscal note preparation, to make certain requests for funding and those type of things. Retired in 2015, and from there I was had a brief respite before I ran for Borough Assembly. On the last few years on the Borough Assembly, I've done what I think are many firsts for the borough. I was the first person to ever get the borough to the White House. We were told for many years that the federal government wasn't going to budge on our issues, and so what we did was we essentially went up above their heads. And here just a few days ago, I actually met with Vice President Pence, and I'm now assigned to a Rural Action Caucus, which will allow us to have federal input on legislation. So all that to say, I'd love to kind of tell you about myself and what I've accomplished for the borough, but I'm here to serve the people, and I would really appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Michelle? I'm Michelle O'Brien, and about 10 years ago, our family, who's previously a military family, we've lived all over the world, but we chose Ketchikan as our home. And just like we've done in all of the other communities that we've lived in, we immediately became very involved in our community. I was very humbled and surprised when all of you elected me as a write-in candidate only 4 months after arriving in Ketchikan. I'll be very honest with you, I didn't know anything about really our community or our school district, but my goal was to work for the students and for education in our community. And I did that for 7 years on the school board and 2 as its president. I've been highly involved in a diverse array of things in and around our community and the state. Governor Parnell appointed me to the Public Broadcasting Commission, and I also served as its chair twice. In addition, Rotarians from all over Alaska and the Yukon Territory decided to name me as their district governor for the 2,000 Rotarians in and around Alaska, and that's to work for the common good of Rotary as a state. And largely that's a ceremonial, motivational role. In addition, I've been involved in things like the arts for city players. I was on the Homeless Services Board, WISH, the Peace Health Foundation, and so forth. I believe that I bring a very diverse, in-depth experience and knowledge of the community through all of the things that I've done and participated in. And I think that that's very valuable to the position in terms of serving our community and making sure that Ketchikan has a better future. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Sydney?
Hi, so I'm Sid Hartley, as many of you know. I'm a Tlingit language learner, and my mentor urged me that at every opportunity possible, I need to practice as such. So here goes nothing. Ak tuusugu yeyi yoksakai gunushchish ha'i agi. Sid Hartley you hut duasak kitchkank ye hut yeti. Akshishku has Swiss Quank Haswusity Shlinge Stuhash Tuwu Aklain Gunuschich. So I just said I would like to say to you, thank you all for coming. My name is Sid Hartley. My grandparents or my lineage is from Switzerland, and I'm a Tlingit language learner, and thank you very much. And I said I live in Ketchikan also. So I moved to Ketchikan 10 years ago. I was 18 years old, and it was right after my senior year of high school. And I went through a huge tragedy. My mother passed, and I needed to go seek somewhere that reminded me nothing of home, and here I am. I came here just to escape for a summer, and I've lived here ever since. I absolutely love this place. I'm well vested into this beautiful home, and I'm here to help preserve the gem that it is. I love Ketchikan. I've always cared about global and national issues in the world since I was a little kid, and writing a letter to the president, and then training extensively in parliamentary procedure with YMCA Youth and Gov in high school. I've advocated on a plethora of Native issues, and I want to give Ketchikan all I've got, and here I am.
Thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with Michelle O'Brien, and then work your way left and around to Sydney and then Rodney. And if you need me to repeat the question, just let me know. If elected, will you actively pursue a cooperative working relationship with our state legislative delegation in order to jointly work on issues of concern to the residents of the Ketchikan Gateway Borough? For example, securing Ketchikan's fair share of education funding, working to see the state maintain school bond debt funding, maintaining the community's 50% share of fish tax revenue, community revenue sharing, etc.
Absolutely. I don't see how you can have a position like this and not be cooperative. I believe that the things that are happening in our local community right now, it's perhaps more important than ever before to not only collaborate with those that work at the state level, but as Robbie mentioned, at the federal level, and even more so than ever before with our city council. We have vast and very important issues facing our community. In terms of the education, that's something that I'm innately familiar with, and to give a brief story, which I also said in the paper, there are things that happen in which you have to be able to collaborate with people at the state level. For example, we were at the Alaska Association of School Boards conference a few years back, and then Senator Dunleavy had proposed that he thought it would be a really good idea, and he was asking for the AASB support for a pooled healthcare system with all of the districts around the state. After doing a little of an investigation and talking to the other members of the districts around the state, we discovered that that would indeed cost Ketchikan $1.3 million additional dollars for healthcare, but it would have saved the Anchorage and Valley school districts $800,000 a year. It was a bad deal, and we successfully lobbied around the state so that the AASB did not end up supporting that.
Thank you. Sid?
So on lobbying for funding to support our municipality, I feel that's where probably my strengths would lie. I have advocated on issues numerous times, and I love to be aggressive in a healthy way. I would love to go and talk to state and federal leaders to seek funding to support our schools primarily. I'm a huge advocate for our school district and education. I'm a UAS student, and I have children in the school district, and I'm also an educator in the school district. So of course that's a huge issue that's important to me. You mentioned the fish tax, and I did read somewhere that that was being threatened right now, that Governor Dunleavy was going to not allow that to happen. But if you've ever been to the airport and seen tons and tons of fish boxes leave the state, you would definitely question why we're not getting money out of that additionally. So yeah, I would absolutely go seek money from that. I think that about sums it up.
Rodney?
So the answer is of course, and I've actually been doing that. I feel as if I've been kind of on top of this issue for a while now. And I really base that upon my experience working with the state legislature, and I know how things work there. So for example, not only are we looking to get our fair share for our community, we're also working to offset any losses that we might have through increased federal funding. And so for example, of the benefit of experience, as a state employee in upper management, I knew of a grant that the state had accessed with the federal government that I believed that I could incorporate and utilize for additional funding for the borough. So When I was in DC, I actually met with Chief Vicki Christensen of the Forest Service. I presented a proposal to her, and then I followed that up with actual plan that I put together when I got back. And I was successful in getting additional federal funding to the borough. And I also know that I have the ability to work with the governor. And I think that's extremely important. I've not come out negative against the governor. I've not come out and advocated for his recall, because I realize the mayor position is nonpartisan. We have to work with the governor no matter what we do. So I believe it's something we can compromise on. I believe we can work with the governor to get our fair share of funding. And I believe we can offset with federal funds. And I've proven that. Thank you.
So we're going to start with Sid on this next question, which is actually a follow-up to the previous question. As mayor and as a resident of the state of Alaska, do you think it's a higher priority for the state to fund programs like the above mentioned, such as education, school bond debt, fish tax revenue, etc., over the residents of the state receiving what Governor Dunleavy has referred to as the full PFD?
Absolutely. I think education is first and foremost because, as you might well know, students are directly tied in with the future economy of Ketchikan and all municipalities throughout the state of Alaska. And I've said this before, if by your senior year of high school you're saying, heck with this place, I don't ever want to come back, then we haven't done our job. And that happens when you don't provide programs for your students. Your job is to retain professional roles in your community, and if you're not doing that, then you're not ensuring the healthy economic growth of your community. So yeah, I do. A $3,000 PFD is not going to replace health services and education and all of those cuts that have happened from Governor Dunleavy. I would happily give up a PFD to have vital public services in the state of Alaska.
Rodney?
Okay, so I have a little different take on this. I don't think this is just about paying a full PFD. And here's why I say that. If you go back to what the governor said before the legislature even gavelled in January, he told them, he said, either pay the dividend required by the law, by the formula, or change the formula. Now the question that you need to ask is why, if the legislature had enough votes to override some of its vetoes, and why, if they a year prior passed new legislation allowing government to take a portion of the earnings reserve, why didn't they just change the formula to whatever was required to balance the budget, whether that's 60-40, 80-20, whatever. And of course the reason that they didn't change the formula is there's nothing they can change the formula to that's sustainable. And that's the real issue about state government. The cost to maintain the same services from one year to the next increases by hundreds of millions of dollars. And so what each side is trying to do now is point the fingers at each other and trying to set up a situation in which they can blame the other person when the dividend goes away in a few years, and that's kind of what's going to happen. And so all of these cuts, they're all important. I felt the cuts were disproportionately assigned to Ketchikan because we're an organized borough. But I feel that it's bigger than just a $3,000 dividend. I think that's what the narrative has been, but I think it's more than that, and I think we need to find a way to make state government sustainable so that we can protect the dividend and protect essential services.
Michelle?
I think this is a multifaceted issue, but I think most importantly what we need to do is listen to the people. I do believe that it is a higher priority to keep essential services available to our citizens. However, I also believe that our state government should have put in a phased-in approach in terms of decreasing our budgetary expenses. I believe that the governor's cuts were draconian and not acceptable to many people around the state. As our legislators traveled around the state, they heard time and time again from a majority of the citizens that they did not like the cuts that were in place. I don't think that it is about a $3,000 PFD, and I think that the argument that some folks have made that a $3,000 PFD will be a boon to the economy is very short-sighted. I think that Alaska is very unique. Our community is very unique. I agree with Mr. Dial in the sense that the cuts were disproportionate for Ketchikan, and I think rather unfair. So I would be in favor, just to kind of summarize, in cuts that were phased in from a smarter approach. Certainly we need to stick up for Ketchikan because it can't be all about the Valley and Anchorage. We need to look out for our own community, and I don't think it's about the $3,000 PFD.
Thank you. Rodney, you will take this question first. As Borough Mayor, you don't vote unless there's a tie. So how will you impact policy and effective change?
So anybody who knows me knows that I do extensive research. In fact, I spend literally hours a day going through various news sites. I know how to do legislative research because that's what I used to do for the legislature. So as a mayor, I think Dave Landis has done an outstanding job, and I've learned a lot from him. I actually look forward to hopefully working with him again in the future. But one of the things that I want to do more as the mayor is I want to increase our relationship on the state level with the governor. I believe we can work with the governor regardless of what people's feelings might be of the governor. We need to. He's the most important person in the state that we will deal with. I believe that I'm going to be more of a speaking mayor. I'm going to do my research and I'm going to provide that information for the Assembly for their consideration, even though I don't get to vote. And I'm going to be a very strong advocate for this community. That's actually my strong point. I know how to advocate on a state level. I know how to advocate on a federal level. Like I said, I was the first person to ever get this borough to the White House. I have contacts now at the White House where I can send an email and get a response in a matter of minutes. And the White House has helped us save over $1.1 million a year in just FEMA payments. They're also helping us with the NOAA issue. So I intend to be a strong advocate for this community, and I intend to be proactive in looking for ways to offset state cuts. And if you give me a chance, I'll show it to you.
Michelle?
You know, I think what it comes down to is being able to build a cohesive team. And moving forward, even more importantly, it's about being able to be collaborative with our city council and our community as a whole. I have a long history of building highly successful teams, whether it's working through nonprofits or in a corporate environment. And I believe it's about listening to the people that are on your team and tapping into their talents. So if you're looking around the table, very much like on school board, a lot of times we would get the packet and I would ask the questions, and I would think when I went into a school board meeting that I pretty much knew what I thought about a particular issue. Invariably, someone around the dais of the school board would say something that would kind of make me think a little bit more and perhaps change my mind. And that's part of that collaborative effort. It oftentimes also happened when the members of the public would come to the podium and say something. I think, wow, I didn't really think about that. That's a very interesting point that's worth considering. So I think it's about building the teams. You know, the mayor is an ambassador for our community and should also be an ambassador of collaborating with other government bodies and the community as a whole.
Sid?
So up until this campaign, I've stood on the same issues for years, and I don't see that changing just because of this seat. So without voting, I would create change by continuing to rally it alongside the issues that I'm passionate about. And also hearing community voice, it's very important to me. I've been that community voice many times, coming to different meetings and saying how I feel, and I like to hear that as well. So I would welcome that, and I would advocate for the things that this community seeks out outside of that office. That's not the only place that a mayor should be leading. If you're a mayor and your job is to lead, then you need to lead no matter where you are. So that's in the borough, and it's outside of the borough at any cost. And I feel like I do that well on a daily basis. I am very well invested in our community, and I would continue to do that.
We'll start with Michelle on this next question. What do you see as the largest challenge currently facing the borough, and how would you approach dealing with this issue?
I think our largest challenge is also one of our greatest opportunities, and I think it centers around economic development and tourism. We recently have an issue where a private entity wants to invest millions of dollars in the Ward Cove project. And I think that we need to hear from the Army Corps of Engineers before anything else goes forward. But I'm a huge proponent of the fact that right now is the time. We need to have a sense of urgency of coming together with the city, the borough, tourism interests, local business interests, and local residents to create a master plan. So a lot of times, government organizations, nonprofit organizations, they'll hire an entity to do a study, right? And you get all sorts of great facts and figures in that study, like the average tourist spends $158. We had this, and this, and this. But it's facts on paper. I have a lot of experience in creating actionable plans. So for example, I'd like to see the community come together to deal with this challenge where we can have actionable plans where in such and such a year we will have achieved this. By this time frame we will have achieved this. And I'm not talking 3, 5, 10, or 15 years. Certainly it should stretch out that far, and it should be somewhat of a malleable document so we're not locked in. But I think as a community, it's high time that we come together to make a real plan with action steps so that we can make our challenge one of our greatest opportunities.
Sid?
So I think that our greatest challenge currently is that we're not being compensated for our worth. I hear a lot of contradicting factors within the borough. One side says that tourism is a vital industry in our community, and I'm sure that we can't argue that. And secondly, that we are lacking in funds, that we are fiscally being threatened, I guess. And I don't understand why those two could both be true at the same time. And I could go on about my own concerns for the ecological harm that that this industry perpetuates. But it's not like we could stop this industry right now. So, that said, if we need to be compensated for what we're worth, we should be milking them for everything that we got. We should be increasing the port fees. We should be instating taxes. We should be issuing user fees for every single visitor service that we have in our community, and maybe those things would pay for things like water quality testing and everything that rallies around those things. So, you know, if you can't beat them, join them. We should probably support economic drivers in our community. It's very important, but let's milk them for all they got. If they're here, let's make it worth it.
Rodney?
So I think our biggest challenge is also our biggest threat, and it's by far the budget. If we have a number of financial issues that are hitting us all at the same time, we've got loss of school bond debt reimbursement, we've got loss of community assistance, we've got borough property insurance costs up 60%, we've got healthcare costs for teachers and borough employees up 19%, we've got the likely increase in the required local contribution, we have a dwindling maintenance fund at the shipyard, which is going to be a big issue we need to look at. And so I've been on top of this issue for the last couple months, and to address just briefly, we've moved additional tobacco tax revenue to the local education fund to shore up that account. We've raised the sales tax cap from 1,000 to 2,000. And to the businesses here, I apologize that happened, but I would ask that you consider if we made that decision when all these financial issues hit us next year, that would have been far higher increase. And now you've got that issue resolved and taken off the table. So I hope you will give me some credit for having to make the hard decision there. We've also advocated for additional federal funds for secure rural schools in PILT. Looks like we're going to be successful there. That's $2 million. We obtained additional federal funds for our fire EMS. That's what I was talking about earlier that I was able to do. I conducted an efficiency review for a borough department, identifying ways to increase productivity while decreasing costs. That's what I used to do for the state. That saved thousands yearly right there. And I've gone through every aspect of the borough budget for the last 3 years. So the goal is to, and we've been successful. You know, we've fully funded education, our nonprofits, and our services, and we've not raised any tax rate increases. So I think we've done a pretty good job, and I would ask that you support Experience, and we'll continue that. Thank you.
For the next question, we'll start with Sid. If the assembly votes to take a position you disagree with, how will you work as mayor to support it?
Well, that's the primary role of the mayor. You're facilitating meetings, but you are there to advocate for the decisions made up by the collective whole of the assembly. That is my job, and just like anything that you interview for, you're interviewing for a job, and so you need to be good at your job no matter what. And I would certainly do that. I wouldn't break the rules of my own employment where I am right now, where I would be fired, right? So, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to get into office and then be canned because I'm not following the rules. So I would continue to support the assembly. I would have my own private conversations with assembly members about disagreements and trying to come to some sort of compromise as a collective whole. But otherwise, when the assembly makes a decision, it's my job to uphold that decision and support them.
Rodney?
So my job as mayor would be to support the assembly. And if I disagreed with them, I would give them an argument based upon the facts. I'm not shy about speaking my mind. I would be happy to do that. But ultimately, my responsibility would be to follow the direction that the Assembly has given. And I've done that before with our advocacy items and been very successful with that. So, but I really believe that the mood and the cooperation on the Assembly has been absolutely outstanding. If you look at how well we get along, we're a model for the rest of Alaska. And I know that we can continue that. We have disagreements, but you know what? We will, at the end of the meetings, we'll give each other a hug, and we'll do what's best for this community. And I would ask that you judge us on our results over the last 3 years. Compare us to the other communities in this state. You're going to find that we have done far better than other Alaska communities. Our teachers do not get pink slips every year. Our nonprofits are not getting decreases in funding. They're getting increases in funding. We have done all of that with no tax rate increases. So I believe in cooperation and working with the Assembly, and have shown that. Thank you.
Michelle?
Part of having a successful board is being able to have a good dialogue, if you will, and a good discussion, whether people are in agreement or not in agreement. Everyone's voice needs to be heard. However, at the end of the day, after the vote has been taken or the decision has been made, it's incumbent upon every board member or member of that organization to adhere to the fact that the group has made that decision and to not publicly go against that decision. Certainly that includes the role of the mayor as well. So you can have private discussions in terms of voicing your disagreement with fellow assembly members, board members, council members, whichever entity you're a part of. But at the end of the day, once the decision has been made, it's incumbent upon the entire body to support that decision.
Thank you. This next question, I believe it's Michelle's turn? Or no, sorry, Rodney's turn? So, let's see. What sets you apart from the other candidates?
I believe what sets me apart is my experience level. You know, and with all respect to the two folks sitting here, and I appreciate that they're running as well, they do not have the experience that I have. I mean, I have 10 years working with the legislature. I know every aspect of how the legislature works, how to get bills passed, how to prepare a fiscal note, bill analysis, how to look for unfunded mandates passed on to from the state level down to the local level. I have 3 years of borough experience, which is 3 years worth of meetings, 3 years worth of getting with agencies and nonprofits and various different groups. I have been appointed to the Rural Action Caucus on a national level. That took me years to get appointed to that. So there's a lot of benefits of experience, and once again, I'm just going to ask that you judge me based upon the results that I've made, and I've listed many of those on Sit News. You can go through there and look at that. You know, I'm willing to spend my own money to help support the borough, and I live on a fixed income, so it's not like I have a lot of money, but if I'm going to take a trip in support of the borough, I'll always help fund that, because I believe that this is about service and not about serving yourself. So I think we have a bright future, but it's going to take a lot of hard work. And I would argue that, don't lose the experience. Don't lose all the progress that we've made. Let us build upon that. Thank you.
Michelle?
Well, I would argue also that with 7 years on the school board and being that education is the largest line item in the Borough Assembly's budget, I too have experience. In particular, I have the experience as the president of the school board for 2 times. So I have experience leading that body. And as I mentioned before, in terms of my leadership roles on the Public Broadcasting Commission and through Rotary and other organizations that I've been a part of, I have proven track records of a highly successful experience. What I think sets me apart from the other candidates is one thing that's very distinct. Compared to the 2 individuals that are sitting next to me, I have more in-depth and varied experience with the individuals of our community and the various entities around our community, whether it was through my experience in filming in KPU TV and telling the stories of the people that are around our community, and it ran the gamut of everyone, history, arts, you name it, to what I do on the radio right now. I literally have contact with hundreds of people every year, and it's not just one group or another group, it's everyone.
Sid?
I believe what sets me apart from the candidates is a newer perspective, having been from a different generation. I think that our borough and any government office would highly benefit from a diverse group of ages. I just learned tonight that Rodney moved here when I was born. That was not a shot, I promise. But I just, noted that. And I have nothing to lose, and I have everything to gain. I have no hidden agenda, and I'm just itching for experience being this young. I'm willing to put in the work. I'm not tired yet, and I can't wait. I went door to door for weeks. So I'm willing to put in the work because I have to. I need that. I need more perspective from the community, and I will do the work to go get it. And I think that's what sets me apart.
Thank you. Michelle, you'll take this question first next. Where do you stand on the issue of the tobacco tax?
I'm in favor of it. There we go. I don't think I used my whole 2 minutes that time, did I?
Sid?
As a whole, I support it. I think you might be meaning specifically the change to the resolution that's on the table about the 15% allocation. I would like to see that, although I am going to thank the Assembly for putting that into the education fund while there wasn't quite a decided plan to do anything with it. I think that would be the first place you should put it. But I joined with Danielle Duckworth and Christine Fury and learned a lot about addiction prevention in our community, and attended Stomp the Stigma and a poster making rally the week prior. And I learned a lot about that crisis in our community, and I would really like to be a part of fighting that. I lost my own mother to addiction my senior year of high school, and so it's something near and dear to my heart, and people have addictions of all kinds, and tobacco included, and I would love to see that 15% go into preventing those kinds of addictions.
Rodney?
So I support the right of the people to vote on this issue. That's probably the best way for me to put it. I was the one that had the plan to take the 15% that was dedicated for tobacco cessation and actually move that over into the local education fund. And it wasn't that we didn't feel that tobacco cessation was important. It was that the Assembly had worked on this issue for 2 years, and we really didn't have a viable plan to how to use that money in a way where we could show that it was producing measurable results for the community. So as an alternative, we moved that over into local education fund, which offset the need for $190,000 in tax increases. So whatever the public decides on this issue, I will support. I will say, though, that loss of the tobacco tax would probably require about a 20% property tax increase to offset. So people need to kind of keep that in mind. But however it is decided, I mean, we'll work around it and do our best. Thank you.
So Sid, you'll take this question first. In what areas do you see opportunities for revenue increases or spending decreases to meet the demands of the cost shifting occurring due to the state budget cuts?
That's a little bit of an open-ended question. I see a lot of opportunity in maybe developing a new avenue for economic development in our own community, like the food truck issue that was brought to the table. Thanks Amanda Pierce for that. I know a lot of people in the community that I'm talking to personally who have lots of ideas that they'd like to bring. And I think that would be an additional economic driver. And I also think that the housing crisis is sort of embedded in this, in that if we could solve some of those situations and more money was in private ownership of housing, then more people would be putting money in the pot. Instead of the select few of all the people that can afford housing in Ketchikan. I don't know about some of you guys, but a 3-bedroom house for like $400,000 is a little out of reach. And I know most people that I've ever spoken to would say the same thing. So if we could maybe solve some of our housing issues, I think that would be a huge benefit for our community.
Rodney?
So this is kind of what I was talking about, how we are trying to offset state cuts with federal spending increases. So for example, we have recently made very eloquent arguments for increases in PILT and secure rural schools based upon the fact that 98% of the borough is essentially federal land. And our revenue from those two were higher in the past, so I think that we're going to be successful at some point in getting increases there. We also have an opportunity for additional grants from the Forest Service for forest management issues that could offset some borough expenses. As I said previously, it looks like we're going to get some of our EMS, fire, and potentially search and rescue costs offset by the Forest Service. And then of course economic development. One of the plus sides for economic development, such as the Ward Cove project, is that it will bring in quite a bit more tax revenue for the community. And then finally, if I'm selected as mayor, one of the first things I want to do is I want to go meet with the governor. I feel confident that I can get a meeting with the governor, and I want to see what we can do to minimize our losses in the future and actually work out a compromise.
Michelle?
I think there's a number of different ways that you can look at this. And back to what I was referring to before is the need for a master actionable plan for right now. It is our biggest industry, which is tourism. I think that, and actually it was you, Mr. Dial, that made this point about why are we not exploring additional taxation in some of the areas of tourism, such as car rentals and so on and so forth. However, I think that if we're going to go that route, if that's the decision that is made as a collective, then we need to be really smart about it. We need to be looking at what are other communities doing, because we can't be hurting the economy and our local businesses here by putting into place those types of fees and or taxes. I agree with Sydney in terms of let's get some more housing on the property tax rolls. I think that's going to be integral. We have a severe shortage of affordable housing in our entire community. It's very, very difficult for people to live, and I would definitely be an advocate of opening up some more of the borough lands and perhaps offering some incentives for the development of affordable housing. That would be $200,000. Or less, if possible. But there's some challenges there in terms of land development and the cost for building homes in an affordable manner. So those are two things. I also agree that we need to be looking in creative new places, such as at the federal level, for additional funding that might be available. Fact of the matter is, there's a possible crisis looming once again at the state level. And so we really have to be proactive to be looking for these additional sources of funding, and we need to be doing it together.
So we've got enough time for one question from the audience. So if you don't mind coming up here and using the microphone to ask, that'd be great.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Stevenson, 33 years in tourism. As the borough is switching gears, economic development toward Cove, I would like you all to address your failures at Herring Cove. Herring Cove, in a 2017 survey, had 55,000 visitors come by independent tour operators, and of that was 550 vehicles. And Powerhouse Road in particular is a DOT right-of-way. Until the borough can transfer that deed from DOT into borough assets, the economic development is in a pothole because DOT is responsible for grading the highway. There are no public parking, which means that you all deferred the parking to two private property owners who have unlimited resources to increase the parking fees to these independent operators. And at the point of an individual driving down there that's needing a bathroom, unless I pay on that private property, can I use their restroom? There are no restrooms. So please address Herring Cove. You are abandoning this economic development in the big scope of Ward Cove, and I think this needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Sid, we'll start with you.
Shoot.
So it sounds like you're saying because of the attention to the development of Ward Cove, there will be a lack of attention to Herring. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So first, I must say that I've stated this many times, I'm in quite firm opposition of the Ward Cove development because of the 1995 Clean Water Act violation, where they were fined $3.1 million and then paid another $6 million to temporarily fix and sensitively fix that area, and its development would certainly stir up the ocean bottom floor, causing ecological harm, and then the economic harm that it would cause would be the insanely increased cost to maintaining our roads because of 8,000 people busing into town every day. 200 buses would be insane, and the bumper-to-bumper traffic and the nuisance and inconvenience this would be to tourists. And I think I would prioritize Herring Cove. It's already there. People already go out there, and I think that we should be putting in bathrooms out there. We should be putting in facilities out there. Because I've even spoken to one of the borough board heads who mentioned that pedestrians were out urinating in yards, and I would really like to prevent that, because if it were my yard, I would be outraged.
Rodney.
So I worked on this issue as a trooper first. That was part of my job as detachment commander here, was to try to keep people from getting run over down there. And then with the borough, I've actually participated in a borough committee to look at safety issues and how we can make this area a little bit better. And in assembly chambers, I actually proposed a plan that we would use CPV funds to purchase a lot out there and construct a bathroom facility. And I think that got fairly good reception on the assembly. However, it's important for everybody to know that bridge redesign and road realignment is on DOT's radar out there. So in the future, that whole area is going to be improved, and part of that is going to be walkways. So over time, this issue is going to resolve itself, we believe, and once we kind of get along in the process with DOT, we can look at perhaps purchasing a lot there without using taxpayer funds, and to develop that area as a tourist destination, world-class tourist destination in the right way, so that we're not getting people, hurt out there.
Michelle.
So you're feeling left out of the conversation. essentially, right? Due to the ward code development. And that's exactly why I was advocating for the community coming together to talk about a master tourism plan in terms of where we're going in the future so that people don't feel left out of the conversation. I've been to Herring Cove, and yes, it's very hard not to run over people. It's very hard to kind of navigate through the sheer numbers of people that are just all over down there. But the fact of the matter is, people are going where there's a market demand. So they're going where they want to go, and I think this is what we need to keep on our radar. You know, there's a number of people around the community that have, for example, this year alone, I can think of three to four brand new tours that local entrepreneurs have created. For example, there's a new walking tour. A young man created that, and that's great. And guess what? There's demand for that. I think we really need to keep our finger on the pulse of where the demand is and not let people feel left out of the conversation.
So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up with closing statements, and I believe Robbie Dial is our first to go.
So thank you very much. I've had a great time here today. I'm running for mayor to basically keep our community the best place to live in Alaska. So over the last 3 years on the Assembly, I've developed a plan that's helped save millions in costs. I pushed another plan that's added new revenue streams. I shored up our local education fund, identified a way to obtain additional federal funds for our fire and EMS services. I helped our shipyard. I helped balance the budget from a nearly $1 million deficit, and we accomplished all of that with no tax rate increases during an economic recession. And that makes us the only community in Alaska that can say that. All services funded, no layoffs, no tax rate increases. Our current problem is that millions in new expenses are hitting us all at the same time. I've gone through that earlier here, and we're going to need a combined approach to deal with this. I'm not asking anybody to take my word on what I will do. I want you to judge me based upon what I've done. I had a career in upper management with the state, including 10 years working for the legislature. I know how to maximize funding from the state and federal government, how to propose legislation and demand our fair share. So, and the recent appointments that I've received, I believe are going to benefit this community. I can actually provide input on a federal level that's going to benefit Ketchikan. So I would ask you that you keep in mind that we're competing against communities that have far more resources than we do. One borough has 5 lobbyists in Juneau. One has a full-time lobbyist in DC. So I'm basically asking you to give me 1 term as mayor, and if you're not happy, I will gladly not run again. I believe in results. I'll show you results because I'm in the same boat as you are with the quality of life in this community and our taxes. So I just ask for your vote. Thank you.
Michelle O'Brien.
Well, before I talk about myself, I wanted to thank all of you for being here, and I also wanted to give kudos to all of the candidates for all of the offices for stepping up to run. It's a certain level of commitment when you put yourself out there to run for office. And so I really commend everyone that has put themselves out there, including the 2 individuals that are sitting here with me. You know, I'm running because I'm really enthusiastic and always have been about Ketchikan. And I feel like I have an innate ability to work with a large, diverse group of people and listen to what's happening and not necessarily take only what I'm thinking into account, but what others are thinking into account. And much like Mr. Dial, I do have a vast amount of experience as well, and I think I bring that to the table. Thank you all for coming, and I would encourage you to get out there and vote.
Sid Hartley.
Well, I really encourage you I encourage you to show up to the polls. I did want to thank Mayor Landis for serving for 2 terms. I think that you've done a good job, and I've come to speak to you personally. I've even brought one of our children to see you last year. And I think it's important that all children are educated on what's going on in our political offices, no matter what. And I really appreciate you guys for showing up. I guess I'm going to close with bet on me. I am young, but I have a new perspective to offer. I would really like the chance to show you my grit and my perseverance and my ambition. I don't give up on things. I was cautioned on continuing on with this campaign, just coming in, not having run on an office before, and I just said, no, I'm committed, I'm finishing this out no matter what. So I also would like to encourage you to think about how vested I am in this community. I have had my children here. I've lived here since I was 18 years old. Ketchikan has grown me. And I'm invested in Alaska for that matter. I'm a University of Alaska student. I work for our education. And I'm excited to work for you if you let me.
Let's give all our candidates a round of applause.